Hi everyone, welcome to another video. So in this video, I'll be taking you through date functions within MySQL. Although there are so many date functions that are available on the dev.mysql.com website, I will only take you through the most important ones, the ones that are actually used in academia as well as in industry. So let's quickly run through these date functions that I'm talking about. So here you see the first query asks you to select distinct cur date. So this cur date in this case is simply the current date that you have. So I'm just putting a comment here stating it's a current date. And if you just run this, it will just give you the current date. If I don't use distinct here, for example, it will just give you the current date corresponding to all the rows within this particular table here. I'm using the table sakila.payment. So if you quickly run this, you'll see that there is like a current date attached to like every row within this table, and so we wouldn't want that to happen necessarily. So I just used a distinct cur date or distinct current date to just show you the one date corresponding to today's date. Similarly, there is another function which is called as the date diff function or the date difference function. So this is simply the difference, or this will simply give you the difference between the current date and whatever date that you're using. So there are two arguments that this function takes. One is the current date or the current date, which we discussed over here, and the second one is the payment date. So payment date is one of the columns that is used within the payment table here. So it's just a column which will give you the dates. So we don't really need to have a look specifically at this. And p dot star simply means that we are selecting all the rows or rather all the columns from this particular table, which has been given a column or rather a table alias as p. So date diff takes in two arguments, like I mentioned. The first one should be the larger of the dates. So since today is greater than any other date that you can probably take here, unless payment date is today's date. In that case, both of these dates would be the same. So if we just quickly run this, you'll see that this would give you the date difference in days. So since this was in 2005 and we are currently in 2020, this is over a period of 15 years. So it just gives you the number of days calculated for those 15 years essentially. So it's about 5,500 days over here. So it's obviously more useful if the payment dates were much closer to 2019 or closer to the current date rather. But this is just to illustrate the example of how a date diff function can be used. Similarly, you have a date add. Now date add here simply means that you want to add some particular number of days or years or weeks to your existing date column. So your date column or your existing date column in this case is your payment date, which we already saw over here. So if you have a payment date as 2005 May 25th, that's what it will use over here. Intervals will just specify. So interval is a keyword within this date add function. It will just simply tell you that you're going from the payment date and you're adding or you're basically leaving some kind of a gap between your payment date and whatever criteria you're using over here. So interval just means that 1 month. So when you're saying 1 month, it will obviously add this 1 month to your payment date. So for example, if we quickly run this, you'll see that all the dates over here have 1 month added to them. So I mean, we can change this interval from 1 month to even 1 day. So in this case, it will just add 1 day. So if you see the payment date and this particular column, let's just give it like say new date, like a new column alias here might be like simpler. So if you see the new date here, it's 1 day after this payment date. That's because we've used the date add function. Similarly, we can also use the date sub function here. So it'll simply subtract 1 day from the payment date. So the format remains the same, whether you're using the date add or the date sub function. The format remains the same here. You can also use a year. So if you want to go back 1 year, for example, from your payment date, by retaining all the other months and the days, you just want to go back 1 year. You don't want to tamper with the month and the day here. So you'll simply run this, and you see that now the new date is 1 year before, exactly 1 year before your payment date. So that's how you use a date sub and the date add function. And similarly, you have a bunch of other functions. Say you just want to subtract the year from your payment date. So you would just use the year function here. I would quickly run this. So as you can see, it just extracts the year from the payment date. If you want to say extract just the month here, it will just take the month from your payment date and give you that as the output. If you don't want to see it in the form of a number, you can use month name instead. So it will give you the month name over here and not as a number. You can also, of course, choose to concatenate. So if you want it in the form of say month name and then year format, then you would simply do something like say year over here and run this. So you can see the month name followed by hyphen and then the year name. So you can basically play around with this as much as you want. Just that these functions are the most important within SQL. And if you mastered these as far as date functions are concerned, you should be good.